So up next is a very interesting panel session where three stalwarts of the popular Cult of the Dead Cow group join us at Hope 2020 again. The title of this panel is Hacktivism Rides Again, and our speakers, Oxblood, Ruffin, Joseph Menn, Omega, and Javaman are here with us today. Friends, I'll let you guys take the stage and let us know the new initiatives and strategies to fight surveillance, racism, and disease.
I'd like to thank Hope for having us and everybody who's watching at home. I had been looking forward to coming with members of the CDC to Hope in New York this year, but this way, hey, we get to reach more people. So I hope everybody's staying safe. I'm Joseph Menn. I'm a longtime investigative tech reporter, and I wrote a book about the other gentleman you're seeing here, called Cult of the Dead Cow: How the Original Hacking Supergroup Might Just Save the World. And it's if you don't know the Cult of the Dead Cow, it is the oldest surviving and most influential hacking group in U.S. history. They originated in 1984 when there were a bunch of teenagers running bulletin boards, and they were interested in finding people like them and being funny and writing text files. Some of them are interested in games or pirated software. And it evolved multiple times through the years, became one of the sort of the top security groups in the world in the mid-90s, most famous then for introducing Back Orifice and then BO2K a year later. These are both tools for hacking Windows machines. And they distributed them to all comers, which was controversial at the time, but forced Microsoft to take security much more seriously. This panel is called Hacktivism, There and Back Again. I'd say that the CDC is probably most famous for having invented at least the word hacktivism and sort of crystallizing the concept, though it had multiple definitions over the years. My favorite is it was hacking and security work in service of human rights. And this is something that has only gotten more important as tech has become more central to everybody's life and security has become more central to technology. So we have with us three 20-year members, at least, of Cult of the Dead Cow in their order of joining. Omega, give a wave, Omega. Real name, Michael Kubeka. Misha joined. Well, I'll let him say, but he's here today because he's still doing interesting things now. But he's the man that came up with the word hacktivism. Next is Oxblood Ruffin. Give a wave, Oxblood, if you would. There he is. Real name Laird Brown. Oxblood is really the godfather of hacktivism. He was its champion within the Cult of the Dead Cow and launched a spin-off called Hacktivismo, which was devoted entirely to hacktivism efforts many years ago. And then Javaman, the last that you'll hear from today. Give a wave, Javaman. Real name Adam O'Donnell. He joined in the early 00s, making him the youngest of this particular crowd in terms of CDC tenure. But he has been very active in electoral politics, including fundraising for CDC member Beto O'Rourke, who you may have heard about. That's it. I'm going to let each of them give a little bit of an introduction to their own career inside CDC and outside of it, and then we'll go around and talk about hacktivism more properly. Oxblood, would you start us off?
Sure, and thanks for the invitation, and hello to everybody at Hope. I started my career well before the CDC, working at the United Nations. I was there working with some NGOs and eventually went directly to the organization and was the co-editor of a book on the General Assembly. As a result of that, I learned all of the arcane features of the General Assembly and ended up doing some consulting there. Afterwards, I moved into, worked in advertising in the early days of fintech and digital advertising, these kinds of things. Joined the CDC in 1996 after a lengthy correspondence with the Death Vegetable. It was a lot of fun. I had no idea my emails were being read by the rest of the crew, but apparently that's what sealed the deal. Actually, a funny story I remember is that I was corresponding with Veggie for about a year. It was a lot of fun. And then at the end of that period, I got an email from Grandmaster Rat, who runs the CDC, and said, okay, you're in the CDC now. And I thought it was a joke. I wasn't sure. And so I turned to one of my work colleagues and I said, I just got an invitation to join the CDC. And he goes, no way, you're a moron. Those guys would never have you in. But it turned out that in spite of being a moron, I was actually invited to join. So I was always interested in, I thought the CDC was cool as hell. And at the same time, I was also very interested in developing some kind of online activism. I didn't know what that was, but I thought for some crazy reason the CDC would be the perfect group to do that with. So as a result, I got permission to get Hacktivismo together, started recruiting people internationally. The first few members were from Germany. Some American guys joined, and eventually we had about 40 people, I would say, who were very actively involved in the group from literally all over the world, some even from China and Iran, believe it or not. But we developed circumvention tech and talked about national firewalls at a time when this was really not sort of public information in the sense that maybe academics and technical people and policy people were aware of these things, but it wasn't anything that was showing up in the press. And I'm actually proud that we used a lot of our style and swagger to publicize a lot of things that eventually, I think, led to a much broader public awareness. So it wasn't just the tech in Hacktivismo, the circumvention tech, but also the style, the CDC style with which we did things, I thought was very important.
Do you want to talk about your professional life at all, the things you've done since then?
Sure. I've been working in the startup scene for the past 20 years. In Toronto, I worked with a company called Open Cola. We did peer-to-peer stuff. Then thereafter, I moved to, I did some more work in advertising, interactive as it was called then, around fintech, and did some consulting in Barbados. Then I got recruited by a PKI solution firm in Munich, which I kind of think might have been one of the forerunners of blockchain. It operated very much in the same fashion. Went to India after that, worked in mesh networking technology up in the mountains in Dharamsala, did a lot of work with the Tibetan community there. Went to Bangalore for a couple of years, worked on a documentary film on cybersecurity in India. And now I've moved back to Germany. I'm based in Berlin now.
Okay, so one of the things that I really like about the CDC message, I guess, is that you can do really good work in any venue, whether you're working inside a big company, a small company, your off hours, volunteerism things, contributing to open source projects, or even in government, you can do really good stuff. And so I like that you have like recognizable, like I think a lot of people in tech could relate to your some of your day jobs, maybe not all of them, but some of them. You're kind of, you wear a superhero cape sometimes, and then you're kind of like a regular tech guy the other times. I think that's interesting. I still don't know what Misha does for a living. Excuse me, Omega. He won't tell me, but I know what he's done in his private time. Omega, can you give us a little bit of your history inside and outside of CDC?
Sure. I was a teenager in the 1980s during the era of online bulletin board systems. Like many of my peers, the movie War Games inspired me, tempted me, let's say, to investigate the computer underground. I kind of grew up in the underground reading CDC text files, reading anything I could get my hands on. In 1990, I moved to Boston, where I met future members of the Cult of the Dead Cow and Loft. In 1992, I became a member of CDC. So I've been a member for about 28 years. 2 more years and I'll get a gold watch. That's what really sold me on membership, was the CDC pension plan. Grandmaster Rat made me the editor and archivist for CDC because I had mastered punctuation, the lost art of double spacing. And then for CDC, I also curate a media list of all our news clippings to track the progress of our global domination. I've kept an informal archive of CDC-related things for about 30 years. In my day job, I work in computer security. I've been a computer security professional for decades, several decades. I've worked mostly in financial, but also in startups, in tech startups over those years.
Okay. Javaman, you want to give us a snapshot of your background here?
Sure. I was actually born in West Philadelphia. I was raised in the city. I went to an art and math nerd high school called Central High School in North Philadelphia, and it really shaped me pretty heavily. We were all kind of nerdy introverts who were into, a lot of us were into the arts and math, and I would spend my time at home playing with electronics and using this thing I had on my computer called a modem, dialing up into BBSs. I would read CDC T files and other people's T files. And at the same time, I would make zines with a buddy of mine. We'd use photocopier and end up writing random stuff. So there's this priming, I feel, that happened. And there was a couple people I really kind of got me in high school, but I was a little bit more, I don't want to say mischievous, but I would say, just liked doing things a little bit differently that weren't exactly by the book, I guess you would say. And so I didn't really have my people amongst the people I went to high school with. I mean, there were certain parts of them that really spoke to me, but certain aspects, weren't fully there. And then I finished high school, and I had an amazing education in high school. So when I got to college, I kind of didn't have to work that hard towards my bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. I spent my free time exploring computers more, more in depth in other people's systems, for example. And I would start taking a train from North Jersey, where I was working an internship, to New York, and went to New York City 2600. And from there, a couple of the people there took me up to, this is actually where I think I first met Emmanuel many years ago. But that crew took me up to Boston, and I ended up meeting a bunch of the Loft guys, Kingpin and Brian Oblivion specifically. I really fell in with those people. It was like finally other people that did hardware crap and had a little bit of a tweaked view of what you could do with hardware. And that part, I was like, I started really feeling like, I'm starting to find my home. At the same time, I think also from my high school experience, I had this a little bit of a interest in civil rights and human rights, and thought about how I could apply these to the broader computer security world. And that interest lined up with some other people's interests, as well as the CDC interests, and that's how I ended up becoming involved. And it spoke to a lot of different parts of my personality and the things I was interested in and the way I carried on my life. Then professionally, I have a doctorate in electrical engineering. We actually have a couple CDC members that have their PhDs at this point, which I think is kind of amazing. And I have been working in computer security now for about 20 years. Started with some people that, a chunk of us went to At Stake and a chunk of us went to a company called Gardent, and I went to Gardent, ended up doing some consulting for different parties throughout grad school, and then afterwards moved to the West Coast and started doing the startup thing and started a company that ended up being the first, effectively the first endpoint defense and response product, which was called Immunet, which became FireAmp, and I got bought out by Cisco. So yeah, and here I am.
All right, great. All right, let's talk hacktivism here. Oxblood, what did you work on back in the day that you think is still, that you're proudest of and that you think is still resonating? I mean, I'll throw out some possibilities because you've done a lot. You advised or spoke with Ron Diebert as he was putting together Citizen Lab, which does tremendous work up in Toronto on sort of monitoring the misuse of tech by governments against citizens. I'd say you helped through your circumvention work. You helped spur the development of Tor, sort of like a friendly rivalry, and obviously you drew attention to what was happening in China with the Great Firewall, and inspired a lot of people to work on helping people there, reach the open internet. What have you? What has is sort of lasting value and importance of those, or beyond those, that you're proudest of?
I think maybe two things. We developed basically an onion routing network developed by the Mixter called the 6-4 system, very akin to Tor. And also we put out Tor Park, which was the first Tor browser, and I think was ended up in that ecosystem. But actually, I think the thing that I'm most proud of, and it may seem like a weird interest, is the Hacktivism Enhanced Source Software License Agreement, which was essentially a open, or a transparent, not open source, but you'd say a transparent license, very much like the GPL, that had some restrictions on how the code could be developed. For instance, if it were seen to or exploit the user in some way, then theoretically and probably the perpetrator would be liable. So I think the idea of talking about ethics and having standards, and it's not to say that the interest in public interest tech now is a direct result of that. It's certainly not, but I think we were part of this movement shaping ethics in tech and trying to form some kind of positive direction and a relationship between human rights and technology.
Okay, let's fast forward and sort of talk about present day stuff. You're all doing things that are sort of different strands of hacktivism, but I think are really important and interesting in their own way. Oxblood, let's stick with you here. What are you working on now that would be fresh to people that who are maybe don't go back 20 years and remember when ethics and tech was kind of a crazy new thing?
I mean, I was working on a project just before the whole COVID thing happened, and it sort of got derailed, but maybe we put a bit of a pause on it because we all ended up doing different things. But it's something I'll get back to. But I think that, anything related to the climate crisis, technology, is something that's quite positive, and especially with younger hackers and even, again, non-technical people. Like you don't have to have a lot of technical knowledge to use social media, and there are a lot of campaigns and actions that are developed through social media. The particular project we were working on was essentially, it's sort of a combination of a mapping app and encrypted chat programs, so that if there were physical demonstrations somewhere. Like we took the idea from a lot of the mapping software that was happening with the Hong Kong protests, and thought to sort of meld that with a chat app. So we got a bit into it and had to pause for a while once COVID hit, but it's something we'll get back to. But I think there is, I mean, anything related to the climate crisis is pretty much the #1 issue with younger hackers. I'm reluctant to use the term Zoomers and millennials, but people, college age, high school age, especially kids who are trying to organize and do something positive. So I see a lot of activity there, and there's actually quite a cool social networking platform. Let's see if I can find it. I might have to look it up maybe when somebody else is talking, but there's an application that was developed by an NGO in Sweden, and it's essentially, I think it's called We Don't Have Time. I'm pretty sure that's the name of it, wedon'thavetime.org. And it's basically a social media platform for people who are interested in anything to do with the environment. So you can organize, you can start campaigns, you can post news articles or comments. So I think that, like that particular platform, I think is quite interesting and a good way to organize. And social media, I mean, with all its pitfalls, it still is quite effective for organizing certain things. And I think that's a pretty solid platform.
Okay, Omega, can you talk to us a little bit about the sort of things that you've been working on over the past couple of years that would, in your view, qualify as hacktivism?
Yeah, so I've been working on 2 personal security guides. One is aimed at helping a person secure their digital life. So the Equifax breach of 2017, I think it was a game changer in terms of the personal, biographic, financial data that was leaked in. And I think that it still puts all of us at risk in ways that most people have yet to realize. So if we assume that we're all compromised, but not yet exploited, now what? So with that in mind, I've been running a guide of incremental steps to help a person sort of reduce the risk of exploit and secure important accounts, offline and online accounts that sort of make up their digital life. And another guide that I've been working on is focused on digital privacy. So a few months ago, I saw a protest sign that read, "First they came for the journalists, and we don't know what happened after that." And it reminded me that the CDC Hive Mind has long had an interest in the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. I think we all deserve access to the free flow of truthful information. And unfortunately, we live in an era when many of us are ruled by naked emperors, and few are willing to say that out loud. So I'm trying to think of what are ways that we can, what are things that we can do to enable truth tellers, journalists, human rights researchers, activists, to enable them to safely speak truth to power. And so those are the 2 projects I've been working on lately.
Hey, Javaman, you're sort of I think the designated real-world electoral politics art of the possible guy. What have you been working on the last couple of years?
I went from thinking that being in Philly, I'd do things like drive people to the polls. I remember one time helping a woman who was in her 80s in a Ruffin neighborhood, put her in a chair, carried her down her front steps, put her in a car, drove her to the polling place, carried her down steps again with a couple other people, make sure she voted, and then carried her back home. And I thought that would be enough, that kind of like ground level, get out the vote type campaign. And after 2016, I and my friends became incredibly concerned that all the technology that we built during our day jobs would become weaponized back against us to enable things along the lines of camps and re-education centers. And we were horrified about that idea. And so the idea is like, what can we do, given the resources that we have, to prevent that from happening? And so it's like, well, we knew we worked in tech, we had monetary resources, we had social networks, and we were able to do some data analysis. And so we decided to start building fundraising efforts for Democratic candidates in marginal districts. And I don't believe, I want to be clear about this, I don't believe that everything begins and ends at the ballot box. It takes, civil society takes everyone participating at every level to be able to move the needle towards what is just and right for all of us in our democratic society. And that means organizing protests, getting messages out, doing education, running for local elections, running for state elections, and then running for federal elections. What we were seeing is that it felt like for people with my political values, left wing, there was a lot being left on the table. A lot of districts were not having Democrats run because they thought they were unwinnable. The reality is that every district at every level should have someone running from at least two parties and possibly more, because otherwise you're not going to be able to convince people that at the national level there's someone to speak for them. And so I organized some people to fundraise for Beto. I think we either through one of the first fundraisers in California for him. It was very early on, and from that we pivoted over to funding. I worked with the Great Slate, and it was only a handful of us that got that started, and ended up raising about $5 million for I think 13 different, in the end about 12, 13 different House races that helped as one part of the wave that powered the 2018 House takeover. And now we're working on trying to do the same at the state level, because if you were able to if you're able to control the state houses and break a Republican trifecta between the lower, upper, and the governorship, you have a say in the 2020 redistricting. The reason why things don't change and you go to the ballot box and you keep voting and nothing changes for you is that there are people who are in power that have built structures around it to prevent your voice from being heard. And the only way to fight that back is you have to show up every single time at the ballot box, look at the core issues that are actually driving it, and push in every possible seat up and down the ballot. And it's going to take time to undo the left's, frankly, our own belief that things will just get better naturally on their own. And that's what we all have to fight for, to push our at least my sense of the United States towards a more just society. And that's, I've been pushing on the fundraising side. I helped a lot on data security, mostly around the basics of getting everyone on YubiKeys, getting their Gmail set up with APP, and getting multi-factor set up. I'm sorry for harping so much on the fundraising component and the electoral side, but I feel like the house is a little bit on fire, and we could all see it right now.
Great, thanks a lot. Okay, so in the beginning, 20 years ago, it was more like about seeding the idea of hacktivism. Now there are lots of different ways that people can get involved. There are lots of different things. Lord knows you all can't do everything. What are other people doing that you think is most attractive, that is carrying the idea forward, that you have nothing to do with? You're just saying, hey, these guys have picked up the baton and are doing really cool things. Oxblood, you want to start us off?
Sure. There's this group, I think it's been around for a couple of years, called DDoS or DDoS Secrets. I think they're the heir apparent to WikiLeaks. They're nonpartisan. They're quite a balanced organization. They're not a cutout operation for the FSB. I think they're doing this all for the right reasons. And they have a really interesting mix of people, some of whom I believe were on the periphery as sort of young observers or participants with the original WikiLeaks group and movement, which I have to say, like in the beginning, I was quite an ardent supporter of WikiLeaks. I thought they were doing all of the right things. And then sadly, it turned into a cult and started doing all kinds of odd stuff. But I think where they started and did some really valuable work, I think that DDoS Secrets is right in that same place. There are a lot of women involved. It's a very queer organization. It's quite technical. There are a lot of serious analysts and journalists involved. So it's a much more organic organization. And yeah, I'm quite excited about them. And in fact, one of my friends, Lorax Horn, is the editor of that group. And I met her in Berlin when she was based here. So she's quite an exceptional person, and she's doing great work with them.
That's great. Javaman, is there one or a couple things that you think is really taking the ball forward here?
Yeah, there's two things I really want to call out from this aspect of technology plus organization stuff. Is one, what Moxie has done with Signal has been phenomenal. We're very, very fortunate that we actually now have a fully encrypted chat system that's not really beholden to an organization that needs to look at the contents to sell us advertising. If we did not have I don't know where we'd start if we didn't have that. There's very little good we have in this world security-wise. I mean, there's TLS, there's Signal, and a couple other technology stacks, and that's about it. That's one big one. I want to call out something that warmed my heart because of how organic it was. Over the past few months, we've had the Black Lives Matter human rights movement, and police forces to try to respond to that have asked for people to upload videos of the protest to be able to do facial recognition to arrest people. And spontaneously, K-pop fans started uploading massive like volumes of video to these police departments, saying, go facial recognize this, and which inflated their AWS bills and saturated them with bullshit. And I thought that was amazing culture jamming, and the people that organized that, I salute you from the bottom of my heart. That was brilliant.
Great. Omega, something that you're particularly happy that you see out in the world?
Yeah, a couple things. This is not quite new, but Secure Drop is something that I think is still amazing and valuable. Whistleblowers in particular have sort of become important in the last year, especially year or two. And Secure Drop, developed by Aaron Swartz and Kevin Poulsen, facilitates the secure communication between journalists and whistleblowers. Right. So I think this is something critical. What Signal is to secure messaging. I think Secure Drop is to whistleblower communication. So I think this is incredibly important, especially to getting knowledge out to the public, to getting an informed electorate about what's really going on. There's been a lot of news stories about algorithms and kind of like the downsides of algorithms, whether it's facial recognition or other things. But I think there's been some really interesting things being done with algorithms. Los Angeles County is using an algorithm to clear 50,000 pot convictions now that marijuana is legalized in California. If they had to do that by hand, that would take forever, right? So I thought that was really interesting. I like what Joshua Browder, he's the person behind Do Not Pay. I like some of the things that he's been doing, including he's essentially written a chatbot that automates the process of contesting parking tickets and small claims. And he's sort of single-handedly saved ordinary people millions of dollars per year just by trying to automate these very bureaucratic processes that often work against ordinary folks.
Okay, and we're almost out of time, but if any of you want to call out like an area where you think there hasn't been enough hacktivism, that is more of a green field for people who are just exploring this on their own for the first time, I'd like to hear that. So whoever wants to say anything, but make sure to unmute first.
I've two big things. I don't know how young the crowd is watching, but go watch Max Headroom if you get a chance. It's almost a little bit prophetic of the future, but one of the things that the show was about was independent journalism being able to call truth to power. And we are living in a society where there's a portion of the population wants to drive us into a post-fact world, and it is getting us into deep trouble. And there are certain organizations out there that are doing these very data-driven, open source intelligence type reporting that I think has massive implications for those of us who value self-determination and living in a free world. And one of those is Bellingcat, which did amazing, well-documented storytelling around the MH17 shooting down, the Skripal poisoning, and a couple other stories. So I think that taking the model that Bellingcat has applied and bringing it towards other areas where you're seeing people bending the truth to try to push forward an agenda, it doesn't have to be that you're fighting the dissensions of the KGB. It can be that you're using it to push back, tell truth to power and give real, documented, demonstratable ways that our leaders are lying to us. Another one I think that's really important right now is a full-blown data archive of all global COVID deaths and illness that with full citations, and making this available to social scientists. There are several states in the United States that's trying to hide this data because they believe that that will allow the economy to reopen again. And the reality is that will allow the economy to reopen again is people not worrying about being sick. I think that sadly, there's such an attempt to hide this data that we're going to need to apply some of the techniques that you saw applied by Dr. Patrick Ball with the Human Rights Data Analysis Group, where they tried to show that the number of excess deaths in some areas actually caused by actions of a government versus some happenstance. I think we're going to need to apply some of the same techniques to actually be able to tell a story of how the pandemic is affecting certain people in certain states. And it takes software developers who know how to aggregate large amounts of information and glue it all together and deduplicate it. This is something that social scientists may struggle with, people in different governments may struggle with, but this is something that if you're working in software right now, this is something you do day in and day out. And I encourage you to build open tools to be able to do this.
Anybody else want to say, you all go, see if you can do good work in this area?
There are two things. One is I would actually be interested in hearing from people who are watching this, whether it's maybe in some comments section or whatever, areas that they think need development or that are not underperforming, but where there could be more activity. Because quite frankly, I spend a lot of time listening to younger developers because their experience with the internet, the way they operate, primarily living on a mobile phone, I mean, it's something I've come to do, but I didn't grow up in that universe. So it's not completely foreign, but it's not entirely natural either. So if people could just, maybe drop in some of their ideas, I think that would be great. I'm not encouraging anybody to do anything, but I think one thing that's going to be inevitable, especially with groups like DDoS Secrets rather, and possibly other groups coming along, that governments and industry are becoming more opaque by the moment. And there are a lot of things that really should find themselves, a lot of data sets that should find themselves, becoming a little more public. Now, again, this is a sort of kind of hacktivism that can be quite dangerous for the person doing it. I mean, none of these things like breaking into networks are certainly not legal, but sometimes as a form of protest, I suppose, or exposure, people have to deal with those consequences. But I think there's going to be more of this, which we really haven't seen that much for a while, but I think it's going to happen a lot more.
Thanks. And Omega, anything that you think is crying out for hacker attention right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to be an online hacktivist, sort of hacktivizing from the safety of your living room. It's another thing to be out on the streets like BLM, protesting, putting your physical safety on the line. There are a few folks like El Armageddon who are teaching operational security to in-person activists. I think they could use more help. We could use more people like El doing that kind of work. Just teaching people how to be safe and protect themselves while they're protesting in person.
Terrific. That's great. I really appreciate the perspective from all of you. And it's nice, I think, I mean, my first hope was a couple years ago, but you guys have been going for 20 years. So it's nice to bring you back here. And if you're watching this live, then please hit us up with questions. Thanks very much, and bye-bye, everybody. Stay safe.
Welcome back, guys. I hope you all enjoyed the valuable insights and learnings from our panelists. We have them all live with us now, and they would answer your questions that we've received on the Matrix. So, Joseph, you would want to start?
Yeah, good to be back, and thanks everybody for the questions. They've been really good so far. Keep them coming. To begin with, I like the time travel one. What would you go back and tell your teenage hacker self? So Omega, you started out young and hackery back when that was a real risk. Anything you would advise your younger self now?
Definitely don't get caught. I think, to quote Mudge, make a dent in the universe, find something broken and fix it. One of the taglines for CDC is that we would put at the bottom of text files was go outside, do something, ride your bike, right? So, coding and hacking tends to be a really solitary activity. It certainly was when I was a teenager for me. So I would say, seek out other people who have different experiences, different backgrounds, but overlapping values, and get to know those people. Find something that's broke and fix it.
Great. So Oxblood, there was a question about offense versus defense. Is there still a role for offensive hacktivism? And the examples the questioner gave were Phineas Fisher and distributed denial of secrets, which you already spoke about. Or is most of the important work or all of the important work on defense? What's the value of offensive activism now?
When we first started years ago, I like to say there was only one kind of hacktivism, and that's whatever the CDC said it was. It was also at a certain time and place and evolution of the internet. And I come to, I suppose, soften my views, or my views have evolved, that I tend to think now that hacktivism is somewhat like feminism, in the sense that somebody asked, are you a feminist? And my first question is, what kind do you mean? Do you mean this type or that type, whatever? because there are quite a few practices within the feminist community. So I think that people should act in a way that they feel comfortable with and that moves them personally. And they all should be very much aware of the risks involved. For instance, if we're talking about offensive hacktivism, then, you know, how offensive is it? Who are you meddling with? Are you prepared to deal with the risks? And if so, and if there's a practical public benefit, then people should do, you know, whatever it is that moves them. You know, like coming back to when we got started, which was more maybe a defensive style hacktivism. We were all very well known, even though we had handles. It would take anybody about any intelligence agency about 2 minutes to find out, you know, where we were living, what we were doing. And at that time, and also because the people involved in Hacktivismo, it was an international crew. So I felt like a really deep sense of responsibility. I didn't want to throw anybody into the jackpot. So we were very careful about the work we did. We stayed well within the bounds of the law, but did positive things. So, and I'm still, I mean, I think there's still a role for that. I think it really depends, you know, what the situation is and the particular circumstance of the person involved.
Okay, there's another question that was sort of a broad philosophical one. And that one I want to put to Javaman. It was, what's the value of attacking the system from the outside versus working from the inside? Can you do real important stuff from the inside? I think that's an especially timely question, because I think many people in tech thought that they were doing good for the world and have had to reconsider. And some people have left like great jobs at great big famous companies with terrific salaries because they felt they couldn't do good work inside them anymore. Adam, you know, the electoral stuff is completely within the system, but so was your work at, you know, Cisco, you know, big company. So how do you wrestle with that, you know, inside versus outside work?
I think you know, when you first posed the question, I went to more the thought of the political aspects, because I think that you had to really define what actually is the system. Unless you're living in a monastic community or joining a Catholic worker or something like that, any level you participate inside our society or at your job or in the political space, I believe to be inside the system. And I think that regarding a work culture, you know when it's time for you to move on because you're not able to be effective. So, you know, it's as long as you're trying to make things better inside, and then once you realize you can't actually make that happen, it's time to go. From the political standpoint, I really want to hammer this one home. There's, you know, people look at politics as being this gigantic system that's super organized. It's hard to make things go, and you know, maybe you should be outside of it and protest in the street. One, I believe that protest in the street is being part of the society, and you know, you could call it system or not, but I really wanted to plead with people to vote this coming November. I am not going to be prescriptive about who to vote for, what you should be voting for, but that is the one thing I want you to do that's within what we would define to be the system. And I think that's a necessity for everyone who's listening to do, given that assuming that you live inside a nation that allows you to vote.
All right. So unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. I wanted to thank again Javaman, Omega, and Oxblood Ruffin for spending time rehashing the past and looking to a more hopeful future. I'd like to thank Hope for having us here. It's a great organization, one that really fits with the cult of the dead cow very well. I think it's a idealistic, optimistic, get involved sort of an outfit, and CDC is a very good fit for that. So thank you very much, everybody, and
I want to say thank you to Joe for writing this book really quickly. I can't wait to read your sequel, When We Follow the Fellowship. May avoid the Eye of Sauron and throw Metasploit into the fiery cauldron of Mount Zero Day.
Thanks. Yeah. If you want to know more, maybe you should read the book. It's Cult of the Dead Cow: How the Original Hacking Supergroup Might Just Save the World. Thanks very much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the conference. It looks terrific.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.